as you all have been informed. So hi everyone, it's really nice to come together and find more photographers. Some familiar names, some names I do not know of, but thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Anshika Burma and I run a little experimental project here in New Delhi called Offset Projects, where we work with the understandings and expansions of photography with a specific focus on photography and printed matter. Why I've started saying printed matter more than books is because I realize books begin to have sometimes very defined understandings as well, and it's always good to experiment and see what form your work can take. Uh, Along with looking at relationships of developing books and making books, it I think also becomes equally important to contextualize the books that are emerging from the region. And it was really amazing when David Solo, who's here, got in touch and checked if I'd be keen to get onto a jury for the 10 by 10 grants, research grants on photo book history. 10 by 10 has been doing some amazing work in New York. Some of you might know of them already, maybe some don't. And if I'm not mistaken, David, this is the second round of research grants that are being given out. Would that be correct?
That is, we launched this back in last year in
Right.
21. The first round completed in June, and we had an event in which the three researchers presented their results.
Right.
And this is now the second round. So we're excited to sort of see where this goes, and we're hoping to do more of this. So. We're also a fairly small organization that kind of makes it up as we go along and learns. Hopefully learns along the way.
I think that's where you and I mean, that's where we found that thing where we're like, okay, we can do this, like we get the rhythm of work and we get that there are, so many people involved. And I think, David, maybe this might be a really good time for you to share a bit maybe about 10 by 10 and a little bit about the motivations behind the research grant. David Solo, everybody is the 10 by 10 grants administrator, and he's an avid book collector. If any of you have books related to poetry and photography, you must reach out to him and share your resources.
Yes, please. About half of that wall is photo poetry books, so and the other part is books about books. So
great. So David, why don't you tell us a little bit about 10 by 10 and the grants that are being
sure. And again, thank you. And this is, as Anshika said, a very informal chat, and mostly here to sort of answer questions you folks have. So feel free at pretty much any time to either raise a hand or unmute and ask, and otherwise raise anything you might want to know. 10 by 10 is coincidentally now about 10-year-old New York-based nonprofit organization that was launched with a mission to foster engagement with the global photo book community through appreciation, dissemination, and understanding of photo books. A lot of the events that we've done and activities have been around both a set of salon events, which have mostly been in New York, although during the pandemic, we launched a series of Instagram Insta salons. And those are largely set up, at least originally, when people from the photo book world would come through New York, and we thought it would be fun for them to meet a wider group of folks in New York and vice versa. And so would set up these events for people to talk about whether they're publishers or artists or writers or otherwise, kind of what they do, and just sort of set up that informal sense of community. The bigger projects have been a series of reading rooms in which we have identified topics of potential interest, usually around sort of less well-known parts of the photo book world, and assembled a collection, had people write about elements of that, and then set up traveling both exhibitions, which are what we call the reading rooms, and in most cases, creating a catalog or book about the topic. The last two of those were projects called How We See, which was looking at more contemporary work by women in the photo book globally, and then followed up most recently with What They Saw, which was looking historically, where the year 2000 was about the dividing line. Again, trying to shine more of a light on the history of women in the photo book, whether involved primarily as photographers or in other parts of the book production. In conjunction with that, and given this interest to, again, continue to sort of explore less well-known parts of the photo book world, we launched the initial grants program. And this was, again, to support the exploration of overlooked or less known elements of photo book history, and to support a wider range of voices, researchers who are looking to explore some of those elements and write or speak about it. The one thing that's worth clarifying is this is not a program to make photo books or to fund people who want to make their photo books. There are a lot of those programs out there. A lot of them are great, but this one is really about researching and sharing the results of looking at some aspect of photo book history. The initial three grants were made, as I mentioned, in the spring of 2021. The grantees were Faraday Mereb, who researched Carmela Lizaola, whose name I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, and Venezuelan publishing. Yasmin Tan, who did work on Catherine Leroy's work in Beirut, and Ushi Klein, who explored Clara Spitzer and women photographers in communist Romania. They presented their results back in June. There's a recording of that, or at least there should be, on the 10 by 10 website. And we're hoping that the results will be shared and published in some fashion. I think this was one of the questions. And in addition to the presentation, we do hope that there will be some other form of presenting the results, although we're somewhat flexible about that. And so whether it's a short paper, whether it's PowerPoint. In the case of Faraday, she actually did a small newsprint publication on Carmela's work. And so we're pretty flexible on that, but we ideally would like some record of the work and something that can be shared, because again, this is about trying to expand the knowledge about different elements of photo book history. We issued the call for the second round of grants also back in June, and the deadline is currently Friday, the 16th of September. Two of those grants are pretty much continuing on the previous trajectory, where we are looking at research about women in the photo book still, but with more of a focus on work done outside of Europe and the Americas. So Asia, Africa, Oceania, et cetera, and from any time period. In partnership with Dayanita Singh and working with Anshika, a third grant is open to researchers living in South Asia, but who could write about any aspect of photo book history. So note that the scope is a little bit different. I think one of the questions that came in also was, if you check the box that says you're living in South Asia, is that mean you're not being considered for the other two awards? And the answer is pretty much it depends on the scope of the research. So if it's applicable, if it's looking at, for example, some aspect of women in the photo book, then you will be considered for all three awards. And that's something that we'll work through with the jury. As mentioned, the three jurors are Anshika, Ben Kridwinkle, and Daniel Bachter-Smith. And again, just reiterating quickly that the grants are not for making a photo book. And despite saying that multiple times, which is why I'm repeating it, we did get a number of submissions the first time of people who were looking for funding for making their photo book. But otherwise is quite open and flexible in terms of the types of topics. The information on, and I'll pop this in the window, in the chat window, is, and a link to the application form is on the 10 by 10 photo books website. There's lots of other content there as well. And basically the submission is pretty simple. There's a form. We look for some basic contact information, a short bio, just kind of who you are and if you're part of any organization, and then primarily a description of the research that you're proposing to conduct and that we would support. And so that's pretty much the information that we're looking at. The award is $2,500 US. And what we do is we pay half of that upon announcement of the award and the other half at completion of the work, aiming generally to do that about a year after the announcement of the awards, depending on the state of events, of things like photo book events or photo events. We may try to do something in conjunction with some festival or conference or fair, or we may just do a standalone event. It depends. The researcher keeps full copyright and all rights. All that we ask is that if you publish the results somewhere else, that you give credit that support was provided in part by 10 by 10 photo books. And so, in the case of the first round of grantees, at least two of the projects are continuing, and actually this has been a way, to get some attention for them to then continue and expand the work. And so we think that's a great outcome. And so again, we're very flexible on that front. When we look at the submissions, what we're first and foremost looking for, is the relevance and importance to the topic. And so, is this something, that, we think is an interesting and in fact overlooked kind of topic? If you're proposing to write about, Robert Frank's The Americans, we're probably not so interested. It's not really something that needs, yet another paper, but, we're looking to say, oh, that's interesting. This is something that is not well known. And so, would be great to see more attention and more exploration of in terms of the broad world of photo book history. And then, we're looking, for a little bit about, who the researcher is and some clarity around how they're planning to approach this. So that's pretty much the outline of what the program is. Again, it's relatively flexible. I am happy. There's an email address as well, which I'll find here in a moment. Yep, there it is. Which you can send to us, grants@10by10 photo books, again, also in the chat window. And we'll try to answer, it goes to a couple of us. And we'll try to answer as quickly as we can, with any questions you might have. So let me stop there. either if there's anything,
Thanks.
I
Thanks for
didn't
that.
cover.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was going to say, if there was anything I didn't cover that I should have, or if anyone has any questions.
Right. I think, thank you for that overview. I think it really helped to get a holistic understanding of, what one is looking at. And I think there are a couple of things that it would be nice, to just reiterate as a kind of summarizing of the talk. And one thing I was thinking was, maybe if I could, David, if you don't mind, I'll just open up and I'll share the 10 by 10 the research grant page that you have, so we can just very quickly go through that.
Sure.
Just a tiny second here. Yes, can you see my
yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So I think, thanks for that, David. Like we said, I think at the onset, and I'm going to reiterate this for you once again, David, this grant is for a research paper that looks at contextualizing, critically looking, the body of one photographer, which could be through photo books, or through a singular photo book, or maybe a geographical contextualizing. So I'm going to keep giving you questions that are coming to my mind, David, and then we'll open it out to the people who are here in this meeting as well. So this could be looking at, let's say, photographic history through the form of the book, but it could be geographical, it could be one artist, it could be one book, or it could be a timeline or a concept, right? Like, it's open to how that could be adapted, or are we looking at something more specific?
It's typical, again, at least, and it's a little bit different, as I mentioned, scope wise, between the regular grants and this additional grant that we brought in. But the original ones, they are focused around the history of women in the photo book. Again, if you're looking at the original three grants and the results, all of them were looking at sort of lesser known individual women photographers, or in the one case of one sort of photographer, more graphic designer, and their work, in one case an individual work, and the other is more the arc of their career. I think one of the things that's just worth briefly sharing is the way we ended up doing the final presentations. They were about 20 to 25 minutes each, just to, again, sort of calibrate within a little bit of discussion and Q&A at the end. So that's about, the magnitude of what came out of it. Although obviously a lot more work, went in, and in a lot of cases, time spent exploring archives. So it is trying to present typically the work of one or a related group of artists, and shining a light either on their broader work or a couple specific works that add to the awareness and sort of filling in more of those holes in kind of the history of the photo book.
Right. So if one's proposal is connected to A, being women and photo book history, and B, being women and photo book history within Asia, Africa, and Oceania, we're then looking at the two larger global grants, let's just say, right, that are part of the research project. But if you are selecting in the admissions form, if you're selecting that this is for the South Asia specific grant, in that case, it is expanded to, would that be the right word, that the scope of research can then be expanded to A, photography at large, and B, geographically, it could be located anywhere in the world?
Well, not photography at large.
Women and photo books. Yes.
I was going to say it's still all about the photo book.
Right.
But for the South Asia Award, it can be, any artist, any location. So it's the
Okay.
broader sphere of photo book history.
Right.
Again, though, we would hope that it's more looking at less well-known or overlooked parts. But we also want to open it up again to a wider set of voices and researchers, and so we're that's a more expansive scope
Got it.
um, of uh, you know of looking at the photo book history, and again, it will be up to the jurors to decide sort
Yes.
of what I mean. I sort of facilitate, but it is the three jurors who will decide what based on the researcher and particularly the topic, what looks like it will be a contribution to the
Right.
sort of global knowledge of the photo book.
Great. No, no, thank you so much for that. And I'm just going to reiterate this once again, that when we talk about the South Asia specific grant, I'm just highlighting this segment which is on the webpage. That these are the countries that then get included within that subject, and this is also like the scope of subject that increases. That was one element. So I know some of you who are here today have also written to me and asked me, what if we're submitting a form and we actually check on South Asia? Does that then exclude us from uh, other possible opportunities within, the women in photo book history aspect? And I think, I think David's already clarified that for us, but if there is another question, then we'll just move to that. Um, Along with that, I think there is, I'm just going to quickly go through this, David, if you don't mind, just a quick re-looking, saying the grant is going to be $2,500 each, and this would be given in two increments during the course of the project. What I want to clarify here, I know, David, some people did have a question saying, does the researcher need to be a singular person? Can it be a collective? Can it be an entity? Are there any criterias for that?
It can definitely be a group. I mean, as it happened, we did get some submissions the first time that were. I don't know that there was any sort of general collective, but there were certainly a couple cases with multiple researchers, and that's totally fine. Just to clarify, the grant amount is for the grant. So if there are multiple researchers, it's up to them as to how to split it up.
Fair enough. Yes.
So sometimes different with conference panels. So I'm just want to sort of clarify the difference. So that's totally fine if multiple people want to work on a project.
Okay, great. I think this is all also material that's there on the website. I'm sure some of you or most of you have already gone through it. So we'll quickly just run through that. Um, like it specifies, you can be any affiliation, any kind of space that you could be coming in from, researcher, writer, editor, curator. You could be a photographer wanting to write about photography, and all of that should be perfectly fine. Yeah, the deadline is 16 September, EST. EST would definitely be something that I think you guys should consider, because it is, you have to tally it up with the New York timelines. I'm gonna close this here, close the screen sharing here, and I think they are, Adira and Alka already do have a couple of questions, so
Yep.
maybe we could get to that as well.
Sure.
Just Adira, Alka, just give me one tiny second. I'm also just gonna ask in just one or two more questions that I have received before, and then we'll move to yours. I've already sent these to you, David, once, so we'll just quickly run through them. For the final presentation or the final submission of the grant, does it have to be a written essay, David, or is it a research that can be presented in different formats if one would like it to be so?
I think I touched on this briefly before. We absolutely will want a presentation. we would like some sort of tangible or persistent form, if possible.
Yeah.
But we're somewhat flexible about what form that could be, and we can work with with whomever, whether that's a short paper or a present or a PowerPoint deck or potentially even a conversation or interview that we do and find a place to publish. So ideally, we would like some persistent record of the work beyond recording the presentation, but we're pretty flexible as to what form that would take.
Yeah, and also just to reiterate, I know 10 by 10 has said that they are going to try as well from their end to see the possibilities of the publication of the
Yes.
research paper. This does not mean that it's definitely going to happen. This means that they're going to try for it to happen. And I think, it there are decent opportunities, I think, or decent possibilities of that actually happening. Um, Apart from that, and in continuing from that same thought idea, there was also another question that said, can the piece or excerpts of it be published with another publication before the end of the grant year?
Absolutely. And like I said, in the first round, at least two of the cases that happened. And so all we ask is that you acknowledge the support that was given by 10 by 10 to the research. But the researcher or researchers retain copyright and the rights to do. And in fact, that's exactly what we want to happen. The goal of this is to get more of this kind of work and more voices out into the world. And so we think that's great.
Super, super. Great. Well, now I'm just going to open it out for those of you. Like I said before, you could put your thumbs up or hands up so I know. I'm going to start with Adira's question and Alka's question. But if you guys have your hands up, then I can move to you after. Adira, do you want to actually unmute yourself and ask the question?
Or if you prefer, I can. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Adira. I have a question. I have actually two questions, but I'll ask the first one, which is that can the research look at women as a photographic subject within South Asia, or is it exclusive to female photographers, editors, publishers, etc., who are working within the 19th to 20th centuries? Thanks.
Thank you. And actually, to touch, since you included a little bit of the second question in that one as well, in terms of time period, we've removed the time period from this round of grants altogether. So it can be 19th century, or it can be yesterday, or anything in between. So it's while the initial round of grants coincided with the What They Saw project, and we said it was sort of pre-21st century, we're now saying it's any time period. So I think that deals with a little bit of the second and part of the first question. In terms of the subject, though, we are looking for, again, the first two grants, the 10 by 10 grants, that it be a woman as in some form a maker of the work, so not as a subject. And so whether it's photographer, editor, graphic design, it is looking for situations where the woman is, or women are involved in the making of the work. Now they might also be the subject, but they do need to be the maker in some material way. And so now for the third grant, which is for people in South Asia, that's any element of photo book history, and so that in principle could be looking at any of a range of topics, including a woman as subject. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, I think that is helpful. So Adira, maybe if it is women who are purely subject and not, what happens if they're collaborators, David? How
Well,
would
that's why I said they could also be a
they-
subject,
yeah, yeah. You know,
but they need to be
part
involved.
of the
They
creation.
need to be a maker in some fashion as well.
Okay, so if they're part of the creation process, then they go in for the larger grant as well as the South Asia grant. But
Yeah,
if it's male photographers looking at women, then it probably comes under the category of the third grant. Am I right in that?
correct. Essentially, yes.
Perfect, perfect. We'll also move to Alka now, and I think that might help us expand on the definition of the photo book as well. Alka, would you like to ask your question?
Hi, David.
Hi.
Hi, Anshika. And thanks so much for doing this. I don't think I met David, but I was part of a salon 2 months ago.
Yes.
Yeah, 10 by 10 salon. So, yeah, thanks for that
Ah,
too. Yes. So,
yeah.
my question,
Every so often, unfortunately, we there are conflicting events these days, so I don't quite get to all of them. So sorry to
I
have
know,
missed you.
of course. Yes, absolutely. No, but that was great. There were three of us and it was really fab. So, thanks for
Mhm.
that. My question basically is it just the book, or could it also be the making of journals or magazines? Could that also be part of the fray?
David,
And
may
thank you.
sorry,
Um,
sorry. If I may add to Alka's question before before you add, I think this might also be a really important question, because when we're specifically, I know within African photo book history and within South Asian photo book history itself, the photo book, in the formal form that we see today, is still more recent, and you know it's very restricted to certain kinds of privileges and access where the book could be found. So I know you guys also did think about this and consider this while defining the photo book, for this particular grant, and it might be helpful to also talk about if it could be research of magazines or journals, but also how you would define the photo book in for the purpose of this particular grant.
um, so sort of coming off of the uh, on the grant webpage.
Yes.
The concept of the photo book is interpreted in the broadest sense possible. Classic bound books, portfolios, personal albums, unpublished books, zines, scrapbooks, etc. So we are, so the answer is absolutely in terms of magazines and journals, and pretty much any form of either publication or potential publication. And in fact, again, two of the initial grants were predominantly magazine-based work. So Carmela Loaizola and Clara Spitzer were mostly doing work that was appearing in magazine and journal form. In the more contemporary period, I don't think we said it explicitly, but this could potentially even expand to digital publishing.
I was going to ask you about that.
And so, again, that would be kind of up to the jurors to decide. But I think conceptually, there are more and more interesting questions, and aspects of, more contemporary photo book history that are being created in the digital space. So we're trying to take the broadest possible view, of what it means to to sort of publish or create a publication, but short of prints on the wall as an exhibition,
So
which
we're
which
moving.
which which
We're
Great,
doesn't
thank you.
doesn't
Thank you so much.
sure.
so we're expanding from printed matter to published matter in that case. Am I right?
Yes, I think that's fair. Or even as it says on the website, sometimes unpublished printed
Unpublished,
matter.
unpublished printed matter. Yes. So I think that I think is allows for a lot more
Mhm.
inclusion, and I think that's a really important aspect to look
Yep.
at.
And to Zara's question as well, Albums are absolutely also included as potential areas of exploration, and there is a very rich and fascinating space there to be explored.
Right. Zara, you've written, do personal albums curated by women also count? So do you mean in terms of like those photographs could be taken by anyone, but the women are putting the photo albums together, which is very much a part of, you know, traditional practices. I think it was the women who would mostly, I think, do that. Would you like to just unmute and clarify, Zara?
Yes. Hi. Hello, Anshika. Hi, David. Hello, everybody. Yes, that's essentially what I was asking about, that even if we don't know who exactly has made the photograph in the album, but I know that it has been curated by a specific woman, would that count? So yes, I do mean that.
And the answer is yes, that could certainly apply. I mean, you would have to sort of explain, you know, as part of the proposal, you know, what it is you would be trying to explore, and you know, how you might go about trying to find out some of those things. A lot of cases, at least what little I know, you know, it's often difficult to find out as much about some of these, particularly some of the earlier albums. But you know, it's a fascinating topic, and we're certainly open to including that in the scope.
Super. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zara. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask at this stage? There is no question that is not difficult enough or complex enough. So, you know, so, and simple questions are equally important. I think sometimes we feel.
And if people think of questions later and want to, as mentioned, you know, email to the grants address, or you know, reach out to, you know, Anshika and I or whatever, you know, happy to try to answer those as quickly as, you know, as possible.
Yes, I think for any question that might even come up later, there is an email ID that David's put up on the chat, along with the link for where you can find information on the grant and the submission form link as well. Yes, and he'd be happy to answer all your questions.
Yes.
I'm gonna keep it at that. Yeah. So I think that's definitely an option. If there's anything specific you want to know about what needs to be submitted or not, yeah, I think this is when to do that. Gareth, of course, Gareth is gonna have that question for us. Gareth, do you want to talk? Want to just unmute yourself and ask the question? Maybe he's not got some network or something. I think I'm going to ask this question for Gareth. Are photo book installations also considered? So these are photo book, you mean research on photo book installations where the authors or creators have been women? Is that, would I be getting that right? Yes, okay. David.
Yeah, no, I'm still trying to understand. So it's sort of about the exhibition of photo books. Is that what do you mean by installation, or is it kind of an individual photo book that is presented kind of as an installation, or both?
Presented as an installation.
I think yes. I mean, I'd be curious, obviously, to see what that involves, but you know, as long as, you know, there is some connection, you know, to broadly defined a photo book. So, you know, if the installation is a traditional, you know, here are prints on the wall, then probably not. But as long as, you know, there is a connection, you know, to, you know, to something that has elements of a photo book, as you know, as we said, broadly defined, but also manifests itself as a installation or presentation, then I think we'd be open to that. Again, you know, we'd have to sort of look at what that means, but we're trying not to rule out much.
Great. Munira is also here. Hi, Munira. Do you want to unmute yourself and you can ask the question too?
Hi. Sorry. Okay, I can speak now. Well, I mean, I don't know if this is an obvious question, but I'm wondering if the focus is on and about women, particularly in underrepresented regions, or even in I'm specifically looking at like the immediate post-independence period. So obviously there is this, it's not clear cut, but there is this thing of like people who are still from the colonial, from the British Empire, who came here and then traveled abroad and worked in publishing. So a lot of the work in the publishing happened in that period still outside of the subcontinent. But I'm wondering if there is a definite interest in more work that was made in the region.
So I want to try to answer this, I think, between the two different grants. So for the second grant, for the South Asia grant as a shorthand, it's actually about the researcher being in South Asia. And so then it could be on any topic in photo book history. With respect to the other two grants that are specific to women in the photo book, what we're sort of broadly interested in is shining more of a light to providing more visibility in women who are involved in the making of photo books in different fashions. And so and certainly one of those cases are often cases where there may have been a woman who was an uncredited partner of the male photographer who got the acknowledgement. And so if that's part of the question, then certainly. I think what, again, the primary emphasis of of those set of grants is just about providing more visibility for women who are involved in photo book history but are not as well known. And so part of that evaluation will be, if this is a story that is not as well known, that's great. If it's a very well known story, then perhaps it's not as important for us to fund. The regional bias on that was just because there's been more emphasis on sort of North America and Europe. We were trying to encourage presentations looking at and again with a sort of broad definition of this, women who are involved in photo book history, outside of Europe and the Americas, and so that's a preference, but again, it's fairly broadly defined. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question. So happy to try to help elaborate further, but the overall focus of the Women in Photo Book grants, are stories that are not as well known or as widely told, and so it can definitely be uncredited partners.
Mm-hmm. No, that completely answered it, David. Thanks a lot.
Oh, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think she. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying, Munira, just to say, I mean, and for everybody who's here, just to keep in mind that there are certain specifications, let's say in terms of geography or whether it's women in photo books for the two grants. The third grant, which is supported by Dayanita, however, is much larger. So you could also submit through that. And then that's just about writing by those who are from South Asia, but the subject and scope could be much wider. So there's always that other option. And I think the form is also going to ask you to specify if it is in that category, so you don't get disqualified or dismissed, by error. So in case you feel that you do come under the category of something that is larger in scope, and the researcher/researchers are based in South Asia, then I think just make sure to specify that. There was another question that had come in, and then we're going to move to Sheena. Sheena, I'm so sorry. This just came to my mind. So I just want to have a quick check on this. David, if it's a collective where, let's say, of 3 women, right, and 2 of them are writers from South Asia, but one might not be, living in South Asia at all, I just want to specify that then it does not qualify in the 3rd category, right? Because all of them need to be living in South Asia.
I don't know that we have.
I don't think we've spoken about this. It just
Yeah, I don't know that we've gotten that.
covered. Yeah.
I think we'll try to be reasonable.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Sheena, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi. So I guess I have a very practical question on what makes a good research statement, especially because I guess this is a visual subject material, but there is no way to reference that. So how much would it be relevant to say or describe about the scope or subject, as well as how much is expected around the relevance or importance, and to what, I guess, is that subjective?
I mean, and again, we're not asking for the research statement to be essentially the final result of the work. So it's more of the form of, why is this, first of all, because we may not know, who or what is the topic that you're proposing to research. It may well be, an aspect of photo book history that, we won't be familiar with or the jurors won't be familiar with. So, sort of identifying, what it is, why this is potentially of interest. What aspect of this story is of interest, and then how would you go about, since in a lot of cases, part of the challenge with overlooked or little known parts of photo book history is it possible to find out anything about, who these individuals or artists or makers were? And so do you have an idea of how you would find this information, whether it's certain archives or, interviewing people, or, if obviously if it's more contemporary, there are more options available. So I think what we're looking, the sort of 3 key parts of, what would be a good research statement is, here's the subject, here's why it's interesting, and here's why, I think I can actually successfully find something out, to tell the story.
Yeah, I think, Sheena, does that help answer your question? If you have anything else that you want to ask in that context, please feel free to.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it is. I guess one of the things I've been thinking about is like, is it interesting to like photography? Is it interesting to like the wider culture? Like, what am I trying to say it's interesting to? Because it's interesting to me, obviously. But I don't know how I guess if it was interesting, how come it's never been, picked up before or had interest before? And so trying to like figure out where to fit that in.
Well, interesting. I mean, it's a good question. It's a hard one to answer, of course, because, sort of inherently it means that, it's not a subject or an individual or a story that's known. And so, I think it's trying to convey, sort of a sense of why you think this is interesting. And, the view then, and part of what the jurors will look at is, why, does that sound like something that would be interesting, to others to know about, that didn't, know about the individual, and either might share or add to, knowledge of sort of the history of photo book work, etc., or contribute other ways to parts of the story. So it is hard to exactly define, the interesting and relevance topic, but I think, it can also be perhaps something, around, the impact that the work had, and so was this, work that wasn't known, but then in turn, influenced other people, or had cultural or societal impacts, or otherwise could be another dimension. But I think, I think somewhat inherently, that's a very subjective and sort of expensive sort of a part of the scope. It is trying to remember how much of this occurred in the first time, but there is part of the proposal. There can be a link, to a visual, if there is a website or image or things that are online that that help. You can certainly include a link in the research statement or links.
Thanks, David.
But again, we're, this is more a proposal to do the research. So we're not expecting you to know the answers, but rather just, to convey why you think this is interesting. And then hopefully the jurors will agree.
Right. No, I think also, Rashida, from, if I may throw in my 2 bits of perspective here, I think what usually helps is for you to know what is exciting you about it, because I think when you're convinced, then you can begin to draw those connections and intersections with other, whether they're parallel histories, whether they're studies or contexts, that will emerge already. I think at this stage, at the proposal stage, we want to know what excites you about the subject and how are you looking at that subject? How are you contextualizing either the artist or the work or the book, or it could be about the form, it could be any aspect of it, but where do you find it having a relevance, I guess, in telling the story of photo book history in context to women. So I think just trust yourself, trust why you're excited about it, and share that with us, because the following year is going to be about deconstructing all of that, right? And I think that should be a good starting point. Just for everyone to know, I think this is a proposal for a research. So like David said, we do not expect you to be ready with the research, but one does want to know where you are coming from and what is it that you'd like to focus in the research paper. And I think that's essentially what what we're going to be looking at this stage. I think David, I know we've gone through quite a few elements already, but as part of the submission form, is there anything that, should we just do a quick run through if there's anything that you feel we might have left out?
I think we covered it pretty extensively. There's nothing else I can think of to add.
Okay, so then, yeah, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the form myself.
Well, the form is pretty simple. Like you said, it's name and contact information, kind of who you are and what you're proposing to do. So there's not a whole lot there.
Great. And I think along with that, once again, if there's anyone who has questions, you can write to David at grants@10by10photobooks.org. As you can see, he's quite happy to answer questions and help you resolve any confusions that you might have with regards to the grant. If there aren't any other questions, I think this would be a good time for us to wrap up. If anyone has any questions, you can put it onto the chat here. But until then, I think I just want to say thank you to David. I know it's early morning and you probably had to make an earlier run to the cafe to get your morning coffee. I hope that coffee machine of yours finds resurrection somewhere soon.
Its successor is on the way.
Perfect. And just to wrap it up for everyone else over here, as David said, primarily we're going to reiterate, this is a grant for a research paper on photo book history. It's not a research grant for a photo book. That's, I think, the primary thing to keep in mind. The last date for submissions of your proposals is the 16th. And yeah, I mean, there are 2 grants that look at photo book history, women and photo book history within Asia, Africa, and Oceania. And we have a 3rd specific grant, which is for researchers residing in South Asia. And if you would like to know if your country qualifies, please go to the website and have a quick check. But if you are applying for the 3rd grant, which is for those residing in South Asia, your scope of subject can be much wider. If you are sending in an application and if you specify that you are looking at the 3rd grant, it's not that you won't be considered for the other 2, but if your scope only works for the 3rd category, then you will be looked at only within the 3rd category in that scenario, but otherwise it's for everybody. I think I have everything else sorted. And yeah, thank you so much for joining in. Have a super day, David.
And just wanted to add my thanks to all of you for joining and for the interest, and very much look forward to seeing sort of what ideas you have. So yes, thank you very much. And have a great weekend.
Perfect. Let's get cracking on those submissions. I do not think there will be an extension on those dates, so I'd suggest, getting your material ready in time. And yes, thank you so much. I look forward to looking at your proposals. Thank you, everyone, and have a super day or a weekend ahead of you. See ya.